Hello, everyone. Welcome to StudyTravel TV Live, a show of news, statistics, and opinion. I'm Matthew Knott, news editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicola Hancox, editor of StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call-in side-by-side speaker view. You will see an icon in the top right-hand corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all today to this episode of StudyTravel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story, and then we'll be joined by our guest this week, Cheryl Delk-Le Good, Executive Director of EnglishUSA, and Claudio Cesarano, CEO of Media Touristique in Switzerland and Executive Board Member of Globetrotter, the Swiss travel group.
We'll also be joined later by our special guest this week, Valeria Samborskaya, CEO of Ukrainian agency Business Link. If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or comments on the stories, please do post them in the chat box below and we will read them out at the end. A big thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Londonist.
Okay, then let's take a look at our first story. And a couple of recent surveys from the Institute of International Education in the USA have indicated some degree of recovery in international student numbers. Firstly, the annual Open Doors survey on intensive English programs, or IEPs, showed that there were 39,352 students in 2021 at the 330 IEPs surveyed, a 5.3% increase compared with 2020, although still only half of 2019 levels.
Japan emerged as the top market for IEPs for the first time since 2004, with 4,298 students, followed by China, France, Saudi Arabia, and Mexico. The latter was the only growth market in the top 5, but there were notable increases from Colombia, Germany, Switzerland, and Kuwait, as you can see on the screen here.
In a separate research paper, IIE has just released its Spring 2022 snapshot, which was completed by 559 higher education institutions. Of those, 65% said that applications have increased for the forthcoming academic year compared with the current year. Only 12% indicated a decrease.
The spring snapshot showed that almost all higher education institutions had returned to in-person delivery for the spring semester this year. It also showed that 67% of institutions were using agents for outreach and recruitment, alongside other methods such as current and former students, social media, and recruitment events.
Okay, so at this point, we'd like to introduce our first guests, Cheryl and Claudio. Cheryl, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Matt.
And there's Claudio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Okay, so Cheryl, if we could begin with you. We got the picture there of 2021 being a slight improvement on the year before for IEPs there in the USA, with some interesting growth from Europe. Can you bring us up to date? How are things looking in the current year?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And yeah, the data from 2021, just to point out from IIE, that's calendar year data,
Sure.
So January to December. So it includes the earlier part of last year that had much, still great impact with COVID. But we're optimistic. The anecdotal data from our members this spring is that 65% of our member programs, and we have about 239, reported increases from last spring, of course, and projecting for fall, over 70% are projecting increases. You know, you reported the applications from institutions of higher ed, but those are also reflected in ours. We're starting to look at CVIP data. That's the Student Exchange Visitor Program. we've always looked at CBIT data, but that was even a little bit more optimistic in that the F and M visas designated specifically for language study was up 10% from the previous year in the fall and 40% this past spring. So, and then we can also compare fall to spring, and it's a small increase to 2.28%, but that actually equals about 21,000 language students. So we're excited about that. This is the first year that IIE did a special analysis of the data that kind of separated out our university and college-based programs from the private programs. And as you mentioned about Europe, some of our private multi-site and independent programs have always done well in that market, but indicated increases with Italy as well. Language travel, short-term programs, and junior programs are in that category.
Okay, encouraging stuff. Okay, and Claudio, Switzerland was one of the major growth markets, as we saw there, and was in the top 10 for US IEPs in 2021. So why do you think this was?
I was quite surprised when I saw these numbers, to be honest. It's huge, you know, almost 33% more. I think we just have to be, I mean, we can be optimistic, and it's absolutely fantastic. But however, I think we have to sort of see that we to get the right sort of comparison, you have to compare with 2019 really. But I understand that there is you know, quite a rise in this, and that this has several reasons. I think one, because it is, you know, the US opened actually quite early as well, you know, in terms of especially, you know, California or Hawaii, where Swiss like to go, and also you know, the state of New York. And I'm talking about the short-term students. So there was no competition from Australia and New Zealand, because, you know, these countries were absolutely closed. Canada had a quarantine for I think it was a week or 10 days, and it was 4 days, and so, you know, all these things helped to sort of shift the market to a country that is safe, and also on spot had not, you know, too many restrictions, because that's also, if you want to go overseas from Switzerland, I think you don't want to have these restrictions. And it was sort of, for us as an agent, easy. We have, you know, we know that is a good quality, it's safe, and it is as an overseas destination, a good destination. And, you know, no competition really at the, you know, at the end. I think that was also one of the reasons.
Thank you. And what else is selling for Swiss agencies this year, Claudio? Which destinations are popular?
We've had a fantastic summer in the UK, in France, and in the US. So these are, you know, for us, the destinations where we sent most students to. We had a bit of a struggle with the UK because of the accommodation situation, but I think that is a little bit, you know, all over the world, a little bit like that. But I think because it is summer, it's sort of short-term planning, and that is, you know, it's not so far away. So Europe, you know, also Spain was having good numbers, but I think, you know, the UK for summer, and also France within Europe, and still, you know, as we've already talked, the US is still very, very popular.
Thank you. That number on using agents was a bit higher than we are used to seeing in US higher education surveys, which is good news for our audience. Cheryl, did the pandemic and the various travel restrictions lead to a bit of a rethink on recruitment, do you think? Are your members looking more towards agents as well?
Well, the EnglishUSA members, representing different types of intensive English and pathway programs, have always had agents as part of their international recruitment strategy. So I can't speak specifically for higher ed institutions, but we feel that the trend is likely to continue relying on agents more so perhaps in the past, because in-person recruitment basically stopped, you know, for a period of time. what I witnessed as an insider-outsider in this was watching the relationship building that happened virtually. And I think, if we look back in the past, talked about the in-person relationship with agents and partners, but a lot of those relationships were nurtured through a lot of activities that were offered. Our Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Services, for example, offered a variety of these virtual connections that were low cost. So it allowed programs that may not have dabbled in new connections with different markets to do so at a reasonable amount, not to impact the budgets as as severely. So we also, as an association, feature agent associations in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. So I think our resources and our confidence in the agent market has rubbed off on a lot of our members as well. And another thing to mention, I think it's worth mentioning, is there's always been a push to increase the diversity of markets within English language programs, for years. But I think this continued push is also leading people toward programs toward turning to agents through these online, opportunities that are being offered, but to be able to do so at a lower cost. So, thanks.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at our next story. And we have a little bit more data now, actually, as Japanese Agency Association JAOS has released the results of its survey of members on 2021 business, and with the interesting finding that agencies sold more online programs than face-to-face courses.
Yes, the 42 members of JAOS sold 6,109 actual study abroad courses in 2021, a 21.8% decrease compared with the previous year, and less than 10% of the pre-pandemic year of 2019.
However, there were also 8,974 online courses sold by member agencies. Of these, providers in the Philippines accounted for almost half of all bookings at 47.6%, followed by those in China on 13.3% and Australia on 7%.
For face-to-face study travel programs, the USA was the most popular destination, accounting for 36%, followed by Canada and the UK. The USA was the most popular destination for short-term language courses, undergraduate and postgraduate courses, while Canada was top for long-term language, more than 3 months, vocational and secondary study.
So, Claudio, StudyTravel Magazine has been tracking sales of online courses alongside regular study abroad programs for agencies during the pandemic, but we haven't really seen anything like these figures from Japan in our surveys. How was the online business in Switzerland?
Well, you know what, it was there was a time where there was no other option, where to just sell online courses if you want to sell anything, really. We tried and we managed, to sell. I think online courses were, it's difficult to sell because at the end there is already a lot of these type of programs in the market. So it's nothing really new. It's new to the schools that we work with. And it was okay, it kept us a bit busy. It gives us a little bit of a turnover, helping a few schools out in terms of having hybrid courses with people that were still on spot. But it's not something that is sustainably probably will be in the market, not in Switzerland. People here, they want to have the face-to-face thing. However, at the Teacher's Home program online, that worked quite well, because you've got that one teacher, you've got the private lesson, and maybe it's also because our market is maybe a bit more mature, or they spend a bit more money on it. So that was for us a good market. But you can see it now. We're not selling it anymore. There's no requests for it, even though and we don't really want to sell it as an agent either, because at the end it's it's not so much that we get out of it, to be honest. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. And Cheryl, we know that many of your members and indeed language schools worldwide pivoted to online instruction as a necessity at the beginning of the pandemic. Are many schools continuing to offer online programs as a standalone product?
Yeah, we don't have, specific data and numbers, but there are certainly some that acknowledge that the demand and interest in online programming has expanded. It's gonna be part of the field forever. But I so appreciate Claudio's comments, because I know that our members are very interested in how agents feel about these courses. They are generally English for specific professional purposes, and other kind of customized offerings. They have created new revenue streams for some and diversified offerings. But I will have to say that many of our programs have been vocal about the fact that they left the online market as soon as they could and returned to the in-person. Some of these programs back, even in August 2020. We have an event. I hope you all don't mind plugging our event, but in October, we're looking forward to putting together a panel of those programs that that said, yeah, we're not doing that. And of course, those that have successfully incorporated that into their offerings. So, but in combination with what Claudio is saying, just interest in what the agents do think about that. So it's a mixed reaction still.
Thank you. So Japanese Agency Association JOS told us that the long-term study abroad business is looking strong this year, but the short-term business has not really recovered yet due to some of the travel restrictions that still remain to re-enter Japan. Claudio, across Europe and most of the popular language destinations, the entry restrictions have been lifted. In fact, we've just reported today that South Africa has completely lifted all of its COVID requirements as well. But we now have a bit of a chaotic situation in terms of flight cancellations and strikes, particularly in Europe. Your agency, you're part of a wider sort of travel agency group. How are you finding things currently?
Actually, it's extremely challenging. At some airports, it's a disaster, but the thing is, it's, I think that's also the reason why it's good to sort of have an agency or an agent helping you, because for the student it is, for us it is a lot of work again. It's not going to be paid for, but it's challenging, especially if you go somewhere, via Amsterdam for the long haul flights, because the airports in Amsterdam, London, Frankfurt, where all the, it really is difficult, and it's going to be even more difficult when the airlines are canceling flights not long in advance, so we can't plan. The big problem is if you have groups on it, and in summer you've got the juniors and you've got school groups on it, and if you've got 20, 40 or even 60 people on a plane, and it's not, it's a big thing because they only go for 2 weeks, so how do they get to London? Or so we work with coach companies, but at the end there is a staffing issue also there. It's not that it's so easy to organize a bus because there's no driver, or there is no one bringing the luggage to the bus, or these small little things. I think it's very, very challenging. And the other challenge is the whole Brexit thing for us, because in Switzerland, you don't get a Swiss passport so easily, so you have to apply for it. There's a lot of people that still don't have a Swiss passport, even though they were sort of born here, but they are now on the visa issue thing, and for the UK it's difficult. So I think Malta is also taking advantage of that, and we get a lot of people, then they can go to Malta. I think the whole, it's a new world, we have to sort of get used to it. It's extremely challenging. It's chaotic, and flight cancellations, we just don't know, because most of our, I would say half of our turnover is, on these 2 months now, which is something really strange for us. We hardly have any bookings starting from November. So everyone wants to leave now because now everything's okay. It looks like there's no corona, so let's quickly go. But there's no availability, there are no residences, there are no accommodations, so there's no flights or it's get cancelled. So it is very challenging, especially because we're not on the full sort of staffing in our offices anymore, you know, because obviously, you know, the bigger you are, the more people you had to say goodbye to. So it's a challenging time, I think, after the pandemic to now see this. You know, you can't blame the students that they want to travel, you know, please go, but it is it's difficult. I think it is extremely challenging with a lot of parts, and it's not just one thing, you know, it's a puzzle. It's the airlines, it's our industry, it's the providers that we have, and it's our staff, and it's the staff on spot. So so fingers crossed, let's just hope it goes well, you know. And the thing is, we're in a quality sort of section. The education is a quality thing, the whole traveling thing, it's a reputation thing, it's about young people, you know, so it is difficult, because if this does not work, it will, you know, end up it could end up not, you know, not because it's our fault, but because we can't provide the quality. And you know, the more you have, the more you can keep forgetting things. And I think that is a big issue. We have to all work on it, and maybe say no to one thing which is not in our minds and not in our hearts, but probably sometimes better for the whole reputation thing. So yeah, quite challenging.
Thank you, Claudio. Cheryl, Japan was the most popular destination for Japanese students. And in our first story, we noted that Japan was the top source for IEPs in 2021. This may be attributed to larger declines from countries such as China, but it is interesting to see Japan back at the top. So why do you think the US holds such an attraction for Japanese students? And are there any other markets you're looking to develop while the likes of China remain dormant?
Mm-hmm. Well, Japan has been, you know, a top 5 country for sending country for IEPs, probably going back to 2000. So, you know, it does make sense that they returned to number 1, not just with the Chinese market, but also the changes in the Saudi Arabian scholarship for English language study. That is a major change that's happening this year. But I think there are a lot of cohorts and exchanges, you know, through institutional partners that I think were obviously impacted by COVID, but the relationships remain stable. So in a lot of Japanese universities, it's my understanding from a board member, have added study abroad as a value add to their offerings, and thus the exchanges with partners here in the US. But the calendar, you know, the Japanese academic calendar doesn't, not just the US, but it doesn't match other markets. And I know that the job hunting season in Japan for juniors and seniors right now is high. So the shorter term programs, I believe, are what drove up that number from Japan as well. As far as new markets or other markets, you know, I know that many of our members are looking, you know, instead of particular countries, looking at regions. And, you know, the Latin American market has always been strong for the US. So if I singled out countries, EnglishUSA still has strong ties with Brazil and Colombia, but we're also looking at the region as a whole, Latin America.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our next story. Living Learning English, a UK provider of home tuition and guardianship services, and Business Link, a Ukrainian agency, have partnered to launch British Homes and Schools for Ukrainians, or BHSU, a non-profit organisation.
BHSU will aim to assist Ukrainians seeking refuge from the war and looking to temporarily relocate to the UK via the government's Homes for Ukraine scheme.
The organisation will provide services to connect hosts and Ukrainians and provide English language tuition and academic support, work with authorities to identify those most in need, and develop an infrastructure that can be extended to offer to other refugee communities in the future.
StudyTravel Magazine will be writing more about the scheme in coming days, and a link to the website will be posted in the chat just in a moment. There we go. So at this point, we'd like to bring in our special guest for this week, Valeria.
Hi.
She's
Hello,
there.
everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So firstly, Valeria, what more can you tell us about this scheme, and how can schools and agencies get involved?
Yeah, so it depends on, I'm sure everyone's kind of seen on the news what's going on. So unfortunately, there's a terrible crisis, really, because I think 1 in 4 Ukrainians have had to leave the country. And I think there are also many millions displaced internally in Ukraine because of the devastating events that have been happening. And I can't believe we're 4 months in, still a part of really a tragic reality. But at the same time, we've seen so much kindness and the best side of human beings kind of being exposed as a reaction to the devastating events and the tragedy. So the scheme is so for refugees, basically our story is personally I'm from Kiev. I was in Kiev when it all started. We had to get moving, and then we were in Ukraine for first few days, and then we crossed the border to Romania, and then we spent quite some time in Poland, which I think is where a lot of people spend quite some time in. And even in the first few weeks, there were something like 40,000 children that went to schools just in Warsaw alone, Ukrainians that went into schools in Warsaw. So, and at one point, I think they said in Warsaw, there were like 2 or 3 million Ukrainians, which I think is the size of the whole city. So literally, when you're, in on a bus or on a train, you hear Russian and Ukrainian everywhere. You can hear all these conversations. Oh, I'm from Kharkiv, or I'm from this, and so it's been really inundated. And I think the idea was with this whole refugee crisis was to try and get them kind of spread out a little bit more and see how other countries can also help. And with the UK, because we don't have a visa-free regime, we couldn't enter the UK, basically anyone from Ukraine, without a valid visa, as you know. So then there was this whole process of how do they figure out the visas for Ukrainians, and if they're everywhere, and what documents and so on. So it took a little bit of time for the process to be invented and then put into practice. So there's this Homes for Ukraine scheme. So the way it works in the UK is you have to find a sponsor, which is basically anyone who has a room, and they can agree to host someone from Ukraine for a minimum of 6 months, I think the government is asking, and not charge any rent for that, basically. So the idea is you find the sponsor and then you apply together, and the issue of the visa is based on kind of the documents from the sponsor together with the documents from the Ukrainian person. And because of kind of where we were as an agency, a Business Link educational agency, we've only been working with the UK for 25 years. We were in a position, firstly, we were inundated with friends and family asking us about, well, how does it work in the UK? What's the system? Can we, because obviously English is the one foreign language that everyone does study, more or less. So it's, in terms of going to school for the children, it's easier, let's say if they're in Holland, in Switzerland, or in France or in Germany, then the whole language issue is a big thing. And of course, English, if the parents can speak maybe a good level of English, the kids have had it at school, then they were thinking UK and, other English speaking countries for that to start with. So, and then they said, right, we need to find a sponsor. So how do we find a sponsor? Because, maybe they would have 1 or 2 contacts in their life with, through work or something, with someone from the UK, and not necessarily that person would be opening up their home immediately. So we, together with Kate from Living Learning English, because Kate and Living Learning have such a long-standing practice of having students come over and stay in teachers' homes, some of those teachers have immediately responded and said, well, we can take in Ukrainians because we have this experience. And so immediately we had quite a few sponsors available, and we started matching them with the Ukrainians that were looking for sponsors. And there was a process on Kate's side, on the LLE's side, of how to explain to the sponsors kind of what, you know, the expectations are and the cultural bits and pieces, and they would have a structure as to how to vet a new sponsor, let's say, to you know, to tick all the safeguarding boxes on there. And then we would have a procedure of how we would be normally working with anyone coming to the UK to study, typically to, you know, for a school or university. So we just pivoted that to this new situation, and of course with this new scheme also Ukrainians have access to the state schools as well. So that's something a completely new area for us, because we've been working with private schools, as you know, Ukrainians couldn't have access to state schools before. So it kind of all started really very early on, in mid-March, when we started placing these, you know, initial contacts together. And then we thought, well, if this was going to be sustainable, we probably need to set up some kind of structure around it, and let's try and you know, even set it up as a non-for-profit or a charity. Turns out it's forever to register a charity. Let's start with a non-for-profit. And see how we can make it, these volunteer efforts of both teams on both sides, a little bit more sustainable and create a structure around it. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
Thank you. No, very well explained. And in terms of your own story, Valeria, some of our readers and viewers will know that you wrote a guest article for us on the eve of the Russian invasion. And just a couple of weeks later, you were fleeing the country. So can you tell us about your journey? Yes,
well, you know, if I remember vividly writing that on that evening. I had, as you can see from that article, I had no idea what was going to happen in the morning. It's very, I think it goes to show how none of us really believed what, you know, in what was about to happen. And I think very few people knew, and even if they tried to warn anyone, you know, it was just dismissed. These warnings were just dismissed as non-realistic. Yes, so you know, the journey was you know, difficult, and I think it continues to not be very easy. So we're 1 month in being in the UK at the moment already. I'm here with Business Link's founder and also my boss, my mom, Tatiana, and also 2 of our colleagues who are working together. Where all 4 of us are working on this BHSU project pretty much 24/7 at the moment. And, you know, just trying to reflect back, it's really hard to reflect on anything at the moment, because it's adapting to yet another new situation, new country, you know, everyone's driving on the wrong side of the street, as you know, everything's different. You know, you try to keep track of the news, and you try to keep track of kind of the general picture of things, and to try and guess, kind of looking forward, what the possible scenarios could be. And it's really helpful to have the industry there and the network of our partners there. And thank you for being so supportive as well with, you know, putting some light on this subject. And I think it's really important we try to keep those efforts up on maybe highlighting some bits about Ukrainians, well, crisis at the moment, because it is already, as time goes by, you know, people become probably a little bit more tired of hearing, and, you know, there's only so much you can take in about the war and all the terrible things that are happening. But at the same time, I think as the situation develops, there can be more support from all of us coming together and resolving this issue. So, you know, personally, our story was, yeah, as I said, so we were in Romania first, and that was just because logistically the queues to cross to Poland were going to take hours, if not days, to just stay on the border. And it was in early days back in end of February, and I think we crossed on the 1st of March. And then when we were in Romania, it was my first time in Romania, we were looking as to where maybe would be the next step. Really, you only think very short-term bits in that situation. And we were very lucky that our friends of offered us to stay in an apartment they were not using so much because they could work remotely, again, because of COVID, some good things. So, you know, people were working remotely from somewhere else. And so the apartment was there, which we could use for some time. And so we immediately decided to just go there. And Warsaw as a big transport hub, you know, it's a big city, it's close to Ukraine. We thought we can try and encourage our colleagues to come and their friends to come and kind of have a bit of a breather to decide what was going to happen next. And it was also in the early days when the UK didn't have a system at all as to what would be kind of a way to enter the UK. And then I think on the 14th or the 18th of March, rather, the first time that the UK launched the scheme, the information of this on the scheme out there. So we were basically in Warsaw already trying to work out the next steps and to see how can we contribute in the situation, because everyone in Poland was so helpful and there was so much support and people were coming together and you know, meeting everyone in the train stations and in the airports. And if you were to visit Warsaw and the central train station there, basically, it was turned into what reminded me of our education fairs. You know, it's like a hall that's completely turned into a fair, and you have a stand for Switzerland, and you have some Swiss volunteers who could speak some Ukrainians, and they were explaining what the system for Ukrainians is in Switzerland. You'd have a stand for Germany, and the you know, free buses being arranged, again, all from volunteers, or some are states supported. And so it's like a fair. You're trying to decide, and then you have some people from Ukraine who've just arrived, and I think that everyone's, you know, traumatized in one way or another, you know, psychologically, if not otherwise. But basically, you know, they're there with their children, they don't necessarily speak the language, and they're trying to figure out, right, you know, what's next, where am I staying, how is it going to work out? And they're trying to ask all these volunteers as to where to go, and it was really crazy. And just to witness all that, and being in Warsaw for some time, but how some of the grassroots organizations came into place and started, you know, put all the different initiatives that was there. We thought, right, you know, we've got to contribute in one way or another, and by enhancing maybe our partners' network and trying to help those Ukrainians that can come to the UK and you know, follow in our steps, and we will be the first ones to figure out how to do it. So now we've figured out how to do it. I was waiting for the visa for about 5 weeks, I think, personally, and then, you know, did all kind of understand the other processes better as well. So we hopefully we can explain to the others how it works as well.
Thank you for sharing with us, Valeria. Thank you. Cheryl, to come back to you for a moment, the spring 2022 snapshot that we mentioned earlier had a special section on the support for existing Ukrainian students at institutions and the recruitment of new ones. And around a third of the higher education institutions said that they were offering scholarships or tuition waivers for students from Ukraine. Are EnglishUSA members offering anything in the way of support or free courses, online courses, and so on?
Yes, Valeria, your story is just
thank you.
Humble.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, because of the knowledge and experience that language programs have in welcoming international students, the support services, I mean, we've always been the leader in that area with community context as well. So a lot of our members have helped newly arrived Ukrainians settle, and there are community courses and online courses, but another program down in Florida told me that they've been helping enroll the kids in the local schools and making contacts with the community. There are probably can't completely compare the two plans between the UK and the US, but President Biden's administrated the Uniting for Ukraine. These are for Ukrainians that are in the US. So there are many institutions that are offering tuition waivers. There is an interest in expanding the area of working with refugees that started one of our members at University of Delaware with the Afghan women that came in last year. I think there are 3 or 4 institutions. So using that experience and like I said, the Uniting for Ukraine our members, especially those connected with institutions of higher ed, are helping out that way.
And Valeria, what can you tell us about the study abroad market in Ukraine now? Have some agencies in Kiev and the West returned to work? Is there demand for travel among students? Are they looking for scholarships and financial support?
Yes, thank you. So I know for a fact that some of the agents continue working because we are in touch with them, also quite actively. And if, use our company as an example. So most of our team are in Ukraine, and like, for example, men and boys, they can't leave, as you know, so they're not allowed to leave. So they're there. And then some of the wives or partners, they decide to stay, and for obvious reasons, and not necessarily they're at home in Kiev. Maybe they've moved to a different city, but so, we try to retain as much of our team as we can. Obviously, the amount of work is reduced. It's kind of changed a lot. So one of our focuses was to offer any support we could to existing students. So the academic students, we've got, kids in schools, we have students in universities, we have kids and students that were going to go as of September. So the focus very much was on supporting those and trying to figure out where they were and, how did they need a new visa in this situation, or what did the school decide about their place and so on. So and in terms of new people, talking about the market in general, we are getting a lot of inquiries, of course, but the big question is obviously economical, because 90% of the businesses have stopped or are dramatically reduced. There's talk about, I think, 35 to 40% of the whole infrastructure of the country that's being destroyed. And, it depends obviously on where, let's say if this is academic students, we're talking about where the parents are employed. So what the kind of line of work is or was. And some of our clients, they have international businesses. Maybe they have good savings. Maybe they've lived half of their time, in another country. And so they're less likely to be so much, put off any of these plans. And there are quite a few, well, some of our students are carrying on, and they're carrying on paying, and they are requesting some bursaries, and it depends. It's all super individual. But if you're looking at the market in general, then of course the general demand is for free places, to be honest, because also, people have lost their incomes, they've lost their homes, they just basically need a school for the children, and they're not necessarily picking one, as they would have done previously. So in terms of the agents, I think many agents are trying to answer all these inquiries. We're getting a lot of inquiries. We're explaining how the system works. We're explaining what's possible in terms of being free or not free. And we're explaining the bursaries and the scholarships that we are coming across. And it seems to be a very individualized approach, depending on each educator. So the market's there, people are there. One thing I'd like to say, if we're talking about market in Ukraine, is please don't write us off. We're not going anywhere. This is a problem. Obviously, this is a big crisis. But the entrepreneurial spirit of our clients, and those of them that are going to be finding employment or starting new businesses, new projects in Europe, in America, they are going to come back to their feet for sure. And some of the requests we've had was, can we help them find maybe 1 year for free, and then maybe they can start paying from next year, So people just need to find their own kind of ground. They need to know which country they're in, what they're doing, how they're going to restart the business. They're going to try and find a new strategy going forward. So, for the small group of people that would be sending their children to a school in the UK, let's say, or to university to the UK, I'm very confident that they will find a way to jump back on their feet, to rebuild and kind of go forward. As for the language travel, very sadly, the visa application centres in the UK in Ukraine are closed, so they can't apply for any visas. Unfortunately, the demand is there, and I've spoken to quite a few agents, and we're all really disappointed that there hasn't been a system introduced whereby as with the Homes for Ukraine scheme, you can apply online and you can enter the country and then do the biometrics when you're here. It would have been such a help if this was in place for, at least for children. So there would have been demand. There were really good offers on, you know, discounts from our partners, and then people just can't come if they don't have a visa, unfortunately. So, but in, you know, I'm sure for other destinations, just because Business Link, we only work with the UK, I can comment extensively on that. But for other destinations where we don't need a visa anywhere in the EU, I'm sure there will be children, let's say in Switzerland, on you know, taking summer schools and camps and things, and other short-term language courses. For sure, they're going to be able to travel, so that they're going to come.
Yeah, thank you for the update. Claudio, has the war in Ukraine, the situation, has that had any impact on your business?
Well, first of all, Valeria, as Cheryl, I'm very moved, but you know, I'm very impressed about also your strength and your mindset, and you know, my respect to you, Valeria, and good luck with everything. I think, you know, the smallest challenge is to sort of ride on the wrong side of the street, I think, when I hear that story. Well, anyway, yeah, the war in the Ukraine, I think the impact on our business was just in the beginning, like the first couple of weeks, where we were sort of overwhelmed with the situation, where people called us up and they wanted to know from us if we would think that this would, you know, go to a European war, if we can sort of, if they can travel or not. But then, you know, after 2 or 3 weeks, it's just started a massive, I don't know, a booking wave of people that really sort of thought, let's just go now, you know, before it's too late, before we are in another world. I think the impact for us was sort of a slowdown for a couple of weeks, but then, you know, especially the last-minute short-term bookings until the end of September, they took off. But we're still waiting. People are still waiting to see what's happening, and you know, we can't plan. I think that is a new sort of thing that the, you know, long-term bookings are a bit missing. But not much of an impact. The impact was, let's, you know, go before whatever happens. You know, I think that's a bit what we noticed.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us up to date with all the stories this week. So at this point, we'll open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests, or indeed for the StudyTravel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we've discussed. So do stick something in the chat if you'd like to ask anything there. But whilst we're waiting, if anyone wants to ask, Cheryl, perhaps you'd like to just update us with what EnglishUSA has planned over the next few months.
Sure, we'll be participating in the Education USA Forum in DC. That's through the Department of State. And then as Matthew knows, we are back in person with our own event in October. There will be a virtual component, but we're super excited to bring the stakeholders who are in DC, the accrediting bodies, government agencies, and then our strategic partners like the U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Services, StudyTravel, of course, Bernard, ISEF, a few others, for our first in person. And we're also waiting to hear on some potential funding. We'd like to look ahead to a couple trade missions. Our trade mission in November of 2019 was obviously ill-timed, but we did feel that it was a successful event, and we're looking forward to multiple trade missions in the future. So, thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Can't see anything in there, so
You've all answered everybody's questions,
yeah.
It seems. Okay, so that looks like it's the end of our audience Q&A, which brings us to the end of this week's StudyTravel TV Live.
Yes, our next episode will be on Wednesday, the 13th of July at the same time of 4 p.m. BST. Visit the Study Travel TV live page on the Study Travel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu, as you can see on that picture there. And on that page, we'll announce the guest speakers for the next broadcast, and you'll be able to find a recording of this episode and all of the past episodes as well.
So that's it for today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Cheryl, thank you for your time and insights today.
Thank you.
Claudio, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and opinions.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks, everybody.
And Valeria, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your story.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Matt, and everyone.
Thank you. And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Londonist, and to everyone for watching. Thank you. Goodbye.